Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman. Guys, thank you so much for always showing up. Thank you for part of being Vertical Momentum, VM Nation. Guys, this is going to be a fun episode. If you're a veteran, if you're an entrepreneur, this is the episode made for you. My friend Bob is changing the game of being a vetpreneur. We're going to be talking about that. He's changing the game. He's also a man of faith. He's a great family man. He's a Hokie, so Virginia Tech, go VT. So he's hanging out in the land of the rising sun, Arizona, where it's hot, hot, hot. So, Bob, my brother, how are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Richard. Pleasure to be here and to talk with you. This is going to be fun.
So hopefully you're staying hydrated out there in Arizona.
You know what? We had over 29 days of 110 degree plus, and last night we had a monsoon come through, and it was only 82 this morning as opposed to 90 something. So it'll break occasionally.
Did you need a warm jacket to keep you cool, keep you warm this morning?
Not exactly, but at least it wasn't in the 90s when I walked my pup this morning.
There you go. So, okay, so, because I do have a traumatic brain injury, if I don't ask the question, I will forget. What is your definition of resiliency?
That's a very good question. That's something that I think a lot of leaders need and demonstrate, because when they have a goal or a project in mind, they stick with it. No matter what comes their way, they might say, oh, this is difficult, but I have a vision of where I'm going with this, and whatever it takes, I'll get there. That's being resilient.
All right, so let's hop in the Wayback Machine. Let's hop into the DeLorean. We're going to go back. So tell us a little bit about where you come from, where you grew up, and a little bit about your military service.
I can do that. I was a farm boy in Indiana, and when I was in college, there was a military draft, as you might know. And I said, I don't want to be drafted, so I joined. And I went through basic and AIT, of course. And then they said, well, why don't we send you off to infantry OCS? Well, that was a one-way ticket to Vietnam, as you might suspect. And so I went off to infantry OCS. And at the end of it, they said, we're going to make an armor guy out of you. You're going to be in tanks.
Yes, I love you. I love you. I love you. Oh, sorry.
You never know what's going to happen. You're being resilient, right? So I went off to armor school, and they sent me off to Germany, which was a very, very interesting time, because in Germany, in a tank unit, you're really interested in, can you be combat ready? Can you have your tank, your platoon, your company ready to do what it's supposed to do? And can you go off to tank gunnery and do well? So I was in the 3rd Infantry Division, and then I went to Korea in the 2nd Infantry Division in armor units again, and then to Fort Riley 1st Infantry, where I was working in brigade headquarters and later in the Inspector General's office. So after a while in the Army, as you may know, they make you put the toys away and they make you be on staffs and so on, and it became somewhat of a desk job after a while. But I was proud to say that I was a member of the U.S. Army for 22 years. And at the end of that time, I went off to a little bit of grad school, and I wound up working in education, working on projects for NASA and NOAA and the National Science Foundation, which was just about as interesting as being in armor, only in a different way, of course.
Okay, well, I did the opposite. I went from armor, then I went to 11 Bravo, and then I went to a Cav Scout. So I kind of did the opposite of what you did. So, what was it like? Because I love all my veterans, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of World War II, a lot of Vietnam veterans around anymore to talk to, and I always try to glean as much knowledge as I can. So, what was that like being a young man going over to Vietnam?
Well, it was an interesting time. A lot of my OCS class graduates went to Vietnam, of course. And one guy who didn't complete the program wound up as a dog handler in Vietnam. And we are still getting together each summer to talk about experiences, what they encountered in Vietnam, and what did the people who went off to Germany, what did they encounter? What was it like? There was a lot of growing pains in the Army at that time. We had some issues with, I would say, racial issues. We were working through some things that the country was working through at the same time. There were drug issues, and also what you will find in the country and civilian society at the same time. So we had those things to deal with. But it got a lot better as time went on. There was the Volar Army. I don't know if you know that term, but the volunteer army.
Yeah.
And then that went away, of course. And now when I talk to people who are currently in the Reserves, National Guard, or active duty, it seems like there's a little bit more professional, or a lot more professionalism. I see a lot of it exhibited from the people I talk with who have gone to, say, to Desert Storm or Afghanistan, who are now ready and willing to go anywhere on a moment's notice to do whatever the country needs them to do.
But because I'm a history buff, I'm always learning. I'm always, like I said, I soak up knowledge. I'm only a ninth grade dropout, but I've read over 6,000 books. Now have over 1,000 interviews. And I've interviewed gentlemen like yourself, 21, 22-year-old kids, in my opinion, but the life expectancy of an 11 Bravo wasn't very high. It was like between 10 and 15 seconds in the rice paddies. So what was that like being a young kid signing your life away, knowing I might not come home?
Well, I have to tell you, they didn't send me to Vietnam. They sent me to Germany and then Korea. But we had some pretty, I went through all that infantry training, and we had a good training. And I would have to say that there are military skills that are essential, both for the individual soldier and for the NCOs and the officers. And people may say, well, I went through this training and I'm a staff sergeant, I'm a sergeant first class, I'm a lieutenant captain. But you have to know your skills, not only leadership skills, but your military skills, first aid, marksmanship, map reading, essential. You're going to call in artillery fire, you want to know where you are and where the target is, for instance. And can you do that 24 hours a day? So we did a lot of training at night, of course, and a lot of maneuvering, especially in mech and armor units, working at night to make sure that we could do it. Navigation at night is especially if you're in an APC or a tank, it's challenging. I can't take up times telling you about the times I got lost in Hohenfels, Germany, on a APC, in which they were trying to get me to battalion headquarters. I have to tell you, I never made it. And they said, okay, it was kind of boring anyway. We'll just send you some information about what we're going to do tomorrow. So I think I've answered your question, but
yeah,
you're bringing back a lot of memories. Thank you.
perfectly. But for me, when I became an NCO, which of course we all know, I had 8 Article 15s, 2 field grade Article 15. So I was a mess. But when I got my life straightened out and I became an NCO, that NCO creed became everything to me. And I didn't realize how important leadership was until I got assigned to the TOC at one time. And then I finally seen the big picture. Because at one time it was just me. And if I was a tank commander, it was just me and my tank, or maybe me and my platoon. But I'd never seen the big picture until I got into TOC. So what was that like, moving up the ranks and seeing a smaller picture, and then eventually starting seeing the bigger picture and getting, that must have been a lot different. So talk about that.
That's a very good picture you painted. I can tell you that when I got to Germany, I was a platoon leader. I had 5 tanks. And a lot of people have gone off to Vietnam. Uh, our battalion operations officer, the S3, was a captain, and it's a major slot because there weren't any majors to be had. And so we had a shortage of people. As a second lieutenant with 5 tanks, I found it a little bit challenging, of course. From the beginning, I had a sergeant first class platoon sergeant who had been everywhere and done everything, tank gunnery, gone to Hohenfelsen. He was so key to what we were doing, his professionalism and helping me learn as I go along to become a leader. A very short time after that, they said, well, you've gone off to Hohenfels, you've gone off to tank gunnery, and after a year or so, not too much longer, they said, well, you're going to be the company commander now. And Richard, that changes everything. As you say, it changes. Not one tank platoon, but 3 tank platoons. And let's put in a couple of infantry, mech infantry platoons to be with you so that you're a combined arms team. And so after another year, they said, well, we need a battalion S3, and we don't have a captain or major in there. As a first lieutenant, we're going to send you over there to occupy a major's job. Now, I have to tell you, it was OJT because I had never been an operations officer and I hadn't been off to the advanced course or the advanced training in order to fill that job. Pretty soon I was the brigade, not battalion, but brigade reserve. They put me back in the tank company when I made a captain, and I'm operating at battalion level, and they say, no, you're going to be a brigade reserve. And so that changes your outlook as you go along, as you say, and you learn as you go and you grow. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, by the age of 25, this is one of the things about the armed forces. I know I can see young 20 somethings out there living with their parents and maybe have a job delivering pizzas. And by the age of 25, you and I, as professionals in the US Army, have traveled overseas and we have been leaders of 20 soldiers, 100 soldiers, a battalion of 500 soldiers, let's say, or up to 1,000. And so you get so much experience in the armed forces in your ability to learn, to grow, to mature, and to, as they say in the Army, be all that you can be.
And but there's something different. Us tankers, we're different people. We're totally we're just different. We're wired different. I mean, and I tell my wife all the time, some of the best times we're in the military were some of the shittiest times. In the motor pool, you're wet, you're nasty, or you're sitting on top of a tank at 3 a.m. in the middle of the desert, just shooting the shit with the other 3 guys. Those are and they became closer than brothers. We knew each other's family. We knew each other's secrets, and it didn't go any further from that tank. So, I think for me, it taught me to keep my circle tight, and I think a lot of people, especially in social media these days, they want a big circle. But for me, I have a small circle, inner circle, and then I have everybody else. So talk about that, the times on the tank where it was just you, your driver, your loader, and your gunner, just sitting there eating chow, whatever. But it's a family. It becomes like a brotherhood, right?
I got to tell you a story that I told recently. I belonged to Toastmasters, and I told this story. You're familiar probably with Table 8 in tank gunnery. Table 8 was where we had to go around a course that would maybe a mile and a half, and you would have up to four main gun engagements, and you would have 5 machine gun engagements.
Yep.
So we had gone through, and I wanted to do well. We had Mercurio was my gunner, and Jimmy was the loader, and Patton was the driver, and I'll never forget their names. And we went through the day course and we had maybe, I don't know, 890 points, and we wanted to be distinguished tank crew. So you get so many points. Let's talk about main gun engagement. You get so many points for a first round hit within 15 seconds. You get so many points, maybe 80 points for a hit after 15 seconds. So we weren't really healthy after that day's run, the first day's run. We didn't have enough points, and I'm worried because I want to make distinguished so that I can have a little patch on my tanker's jacket that says TCQC, Tank Crew Qualification Course Distinguished. I said, hey guys, there's one target where we fire. It's a HEP engagement at 500 meters, high explosive plastic, HEP, anti-personnel round. I says, do you suppose we could hit that twice within 15 seconds or less? And they're talking about it. We're thinking it over. What would the loader have to do? What fire commands would I have to give? What would the gunner have to do? They said, yeah, we think we could do that. So, the fire command is the driver stop, gunner, HEP, anti-tank. We were already stopped. And the loader was standing there. He had that HEP round in his hand already. And we hit that sucker twice in 15 seconds or less. And when we came around, there's a crew debriefing because there's somebody riding on the top of your tank crew examiner, who gives you a debriefing. So we came around and we're in the debriefing area, and he says, tank commander, I don't know what got into you, but I saw something tonight I didn't even know was humanly possible, because you hit that HEP target twice within 15 seconds for maximum score of, and we had 2190 points. We were the second in the 3rd Infantry Division by 10 points, and your crew is tight. I'm getting back to what you were talking about. It wasn't like that we socialized and went off to dinner and et cetera, but in that tank, we were a crew, we were a team. We worked together. We talked about where we came from, who our families were, et cetera, where we were going after we left Kissingen, Germany, and et cetera, et cetera. I'll never forget those guys. And maybe they're out there somewhere, someplace saying, you know what? On table 8 in Grafenwehr, we hit that sucker twice within 15 seconds, maybe. So,
But for me, like I said, I got thrown out of the military the first time for being a drug addict. But the only reason that I lasted so long, because I was the guy, if we went to tank table 8, I was the guy that never slept. I was the guy that would just drink coffee, hot seat, tank to tank to tank, because I was like, you know what? If I'm out here, I want to have fun. Who cares about sleep? I'll sleep when we get back to the rear with the gear. So eventually I got so good where everybody wanted me, because once you realize who the hot shots are, that's when you start saying, all right, it's kind of like football. You try to get the best quarterback, the best wide receivers, and you kind of stack the deck. And I think in business, same thing. We need to start stacking the deck, correct?
right.
Because everybody has, like for me, I started off as a driver. I tried to become the ultimate driver. I became the ultimate loader. I mean, I would load. I think my record was I went down range 8 times in one night. I loved it. My boots were all beat up, but I had fun loading. And everybody was like, oh, Kaufman's available. Let's get him on the tank. So, and for me, that taught me that even though I was a drug addict, even though I was an alcoholic, if you were willing to work harder than everybody else, you're still going to get ahead, right?
Yep. I can remember times, and I'm having flashbacks. You're reminding me now when we took our company through tank gunnery. The leaders didn't sleep much. You would go, and we were running table 7 on the night range, where you navigate around that mile course, but you only fire machine guns on table 7. We made 42 runs that night, 42, which was somewhat, somebody listening might say, well, is that a big deal? there are only 17 tanks in the company. And so everybody got to make that run, and we just kept going and kept going and kept going. Always had a tank ready, kept going. And the people in battalion said, "What did you do? Oh my goodness, you've set this standard so high." But getting back to what you were talking about, all the leaders had is like a sense of urgency. We're going to do this. We need to do this, and we're going to make it happen. And everybody worked in as a team to keep those tanks ready and keep running. I can recall one of the, I think it was my driver as a company commander. He says, "You know, the guys are saying that you're probably on speed." I said, "What?" "Yeah, because you never sleep. You're always going, you're always doing, you're always awake. So you must be on speed." I said, "Well, I'm just on cigars and coffee." I
Well,
usually have a cigar. You know, you get a little hit, you get a little jolt from a cigar. And so I was rum soaked crooks in those days. I don't do that anymore, but I had a cigar and coffee, and we just kept going because we had a job to do and we got it done.
well, I mean, I know I had one tank crew, truly amazing. One of the guys is gone now, but everybody would want to hot seat our tank because they knew that we had everything set up right. We had our gun tube set up right, where you don't even have to try to hit, and we were going to hit. And I was a tank commander, so I had my 50 cal. I had that thing set up. It sung like a bird. But it seems like once everybody knows that there's a certain group or a certain tank in the company, everybody wants to hot seat that tank, right?
That's interesting. You mentioned that M85 caliber 50. I didn't let anybody touch that thing. I cleaned it myself, and I had it always ready to go. It was such a reliable weapon. But you reminded me when I was not in the desert, but in Hohenfels, parts parts were difficult to come by, and at one point I had the only tank that had a heater. And if you're out in the middle of the winter and there's 6 or 7 inches of snow on the ground and you were the only person with a heater, people are cold. And so at one point, I think I had 19 people in my platoon, and we were all on my tank because they were they were trying to keep warm, trying to keep from getting frostbitten and so on. So yeah, you're right. That there would be one tank or a couple of tanks that were really good, and everybody was covetous of their equipment.
But now you said you did over 20 years in the military. Um, so you when you decided to get out, did you just know it was time? And did you plan ahead? And how far did you plan ahead to get out?
I think you asked me how I came to the decision to get out of the Army. I think
Yep,
that's what you said. It's coming
yep,
through a little bit broken.
yep. What was
I
the
had been
decision?
there. I had been there 22 years, and it was time for promotion. And I was working, as I said, I wasn't having as much fun because it now was a desk job, and they put me in ADP or IT. Now we call it IT, information technology. And we had there was a person in the Pentagon, a personnel guy said, "Well, I have to send you to Stuttgart, Germany, and you're for sure to get a promotion because, oh, by the way, I'm on the promotion board." And after 22 years, it seemed like I was living in Blacksburg, Virginia, home of, you guessed it, Virginia Tech Hokies. And I said, "Well, maybe I'll just retire and go to grad school." And so that's what happened. I had a family. There was a parakeet and a dog, and it didn't seem like a parakeet and a dog would make a good transition from Blacksburg, Virginia to Stuttgart, Germany. And so I got out. Uh, I went back to grad school. I got a degree in instructional design, actually curriculum and instruction, which means that you're working with teachers in K-12 or university faculty on how do people learn and how do we teach them. And I wound up in a place called the NASA Classroom of the Future in Wheeling, West Virginia. Now, at that point, we were creating materials for NASA and NOAA, National Science Foundation and training teachers on how to use those things. So the good parts about this, I'm going beyond your question, was that I got to work with some stellar teachers, professors, and scientists who were working in mostly climate change and looking at Earth from space, Landsat communications, that is imagery, so that we could analyze what was happening to the Earth. So I had a good transition. I got to then travel quite a bit and go to place training people, doing presentations in places like Singapore or in Lima, Peru, or in Santiago, Chile. So I got to travel around a little bit. I was also in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, doing the same kind of work. So I would say that people might ask a person, I'm going beyond your question, why should I join the armed forces? Well, because one, you learn, you grow, and you become a mature leader or person, a person who is a manager of resources working on projects. And the armed forces prepares you for what comes later. And I have to give a lot of thanks to the US Army and also to the GI Bill, because I use the GI Bill for more education.
All right.
So I
So
went,
before we, because I want to hop back a little bit, but first I want
okay,
to thank sponsors. I met Bob through the Warrior Council, as you guys can see down below. If you're a veteran, if you're an entrepreneur, you need to join the Warrior Council. You need to join the Vetpreneur Tribe. We're over 16,000 strong veterans that are building businesses and changing our families' destinies. And guys, if you, even back in early 19, like I said, I'm a big history buff. Even back in the early 1900s, Mr. Carnegie would always talk about masterminds, that you need to be part of a mastermind. And this way you can actually, people can help you, you can help them. And that's what the Warrior Council is all about. So guys, make sure if you guys are veteran entrepreneurs, check out the Warrior Council. Marshall, Robert, Bob. I mean, we have a lot of great people. So make sure you check us out. Also, guys, I was with GNC for over 30 years, in the military for 23. I loved coffee. I loved pre-workouts, but either they tasted like ass or I would drink it and I'd be in the shitter 5 minutes later. So I decided to come out with my own coffee. It's called Vertical Momentum Coffee. But the best part about that coffee is 100% of the profits go to help veterans struggling with homelessness and PTSD. So anytime you buy a bag of coffee, 100% of the profits go to Project Die Hard. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 12 veterans and their families, take care of them for a year, mentally, physically, spiritually, at zero cost to the veteran. So guys, if you love coffee and you want to help save veterans, because did you know that last night over 65,000 veterans were sleeping in the streets? My goal is to eradicate veteran homelessness. So, and if people like coffee, it makes it all out the better. So guys, if you love coffee, make sure you check out Vertical Momentum Coffee. So Bob, let me ask you a question, because for me, I got hurt on duty. I lost my vision. I lost my career. And I was in a very deep, dark space. And a lot of us, we don't do 20 years. Some of us do 4, 8. And a lot of us, like somebody in our group, Sergeant Nick, talks about, when you step off base, the military doesn't really give a shit about you. The phone stops ringing. You don't have a job anymore. A lot of us don't have money because we got divorced, bankruptcy, all that good stuff. And when we get out, we just feel alone. So, with what you're doing now, and you've talked to many, many veterans, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing?
I would have to say that there is definitely a need out there for doing what you are doing and what you're talking about. As I go around and I talk about our project, GettaVet, and people will nod their heads and say, "Oh, that is such a good idea because we want to take care of our veterans." What I'm getting from the public and from people who've never been in the armed forces is a lot of pride in the armed forces and pride in what veterans have done and continue to do. That is, the people on active duty and supporting our country. I would have to say that not only, yeah, and here I live in Phoenix, and you probably can find news about homeless people just in general in Los Angeles and Portland and Seattle and other large cities. That homelessness is a real issue, and especially for veterans. And so I give you kudos for what you were just talking about taking care of those veterans.
So now, like you said, you've talked to many veterans and veteran business owners. So for me, I found that a veteran or first responder is less likely to take their own life if they have another mission. And for me, I found out that for me, have my business became my mission, and then my mission became my crusade to help other people. So and I found that if a veteran, once they take off the uniform, if they have another mission, they're less likely to take their lives. So, talk to us a little bit about that, about finding your mission after taking off our uniform. Because most people don't realize that no matter what you do, any kind of business has a shelf life. And veterans don't think about it when they're a young buck at 17. I didn't think about it. I joined at 17 as a young buck, and I got out at 44 as the old man. You know what I mean? So talk to us about that. Talk to us a little bit about that.
There were about 5 questions based on everything you just said to me. So I'm going to talk about that mission and about preparation for what comes after. Now, I'm going to use our program called GettaVet as an example and weave that in there. GettaVet is a freelancing platform, and freelancing means that the individuals are self-employed and they can work on whatever projects they want to work on. They can do it by the project, by the day, by the hour, by the job, and they're self-employed. Now, let's back up and talk about, well, how do we get there? What does that mean? Freelancing, well, it's also called gig work or side hustles. This has grown extensively in the last few years. My most recent looking on the internet says that there are 36% or more of the US workforce doing freelancing work, or over 70 million Americans. Statistica.com says that by 2027, 50% of the US workforce will be engaged in freelancing, or over 80 million Americans. That's a lot of people doing gig work or freelancing. Now, let me back up to something you said. How do you know what to do and how do you figure it out? Well, one has to look at his or her own skills. There's a wide variety of things that you can do. You can go out after you get out of the service, you can go out and get a 40-hour-a-week job, or you can do some freelancing. I will talk about that. So you would have an inventory. What are your skills? What is it you like to do? If you don't think you have marketable skills, how can you go about getting them? GI Bill, for instance, or take some courses, and the types of things there's a multitude of jobs that you can do out there as a freelancer. You might not even need to have a degree or a background in something. For instance, what if you wanted to do landscaping or lawn services, for instance, or painting houses? I've painted so many houses. I've never been to any kind of workshop or schooling, but I've painted a lot of houses, and I could probably put my shingle out there on a freelancing website and say, I'll paint your house. And I would probably do a pretty fair job of it. But one would look at their skills and see what they want to do. And the skill set in freelancing runs from the kind of handyman things where you go out and do something on site. You go out and you repair a sink that's stopped up. You go out and put up a shelf for somebody that needs a shelf put up. You do that painting that I was talking about, yard work, fixing things, carpentry. Or you can do everything on the internet and you don't have to go anywhere. You can design a website. You can do some transcribing. You might be a photographer, data analyst, a copywriter, just a multitude of things. You could be a proofreader. Richard, you read a lot of books, and I bet you come to a place where there's a typo or a misspelled word occasionally. And every time that happens to me, I say, "Hey, author, didn't you have a proofreader?" I've often thought about writing to those people saying, "Hey, if you got a book in draft, let me read it. I'll proofread it for you for nothing just to read your book." I'm digressing a little bit, but I'm talking about how many different types of jobs that are out there that a person can do for side hustles and gig work. Another thing you said, that the shelf life of these things, how long do they last? Have you noticed artificial intelligence and how it has grown in the last couple of years? And I just set in on somebody with um, an SBA score person talking about artificial intelligence, and she was talking about Chat GTP. And as she was talking about that, I was amazed at what she was doing. She was creating a business plan, marketing plans, blog writing, emails, all using Chat GTP with add-ons, various plugins to add to its functionality. And I thought, holy smokes, can you look at that? And then you can go to YouTube and start learning how to use Chat GTP or Jasper or other AI um, platforms like that. And that's something new that has come along. And that's one of the things that people are doing in gig work. So what do you do? How do you figure this out? Take stock of your skills, your interests, become an expert, or put out some feelers, look into the market, maybe even sign up for some place like Angie's List or Upwork or Thumbtack or some of the other platforms and say, here I am, here's what I do, and then you're off and running.
Okay, but something you just mentioned, and I didn't know we were going to go there, but we're going to go there. I use Chat GPT every day. I use it as a tool. I don't use it as a crutch. I use it as a tool. Like a lawyer has an assistant, like all these other big businessmen, they have their virtual assistants. I use ChatGPT as a virtual assistant. But I knew I got very interested in it, but I knew if I wanted to learn, I think it was like 4 months straight. Every time my wife looked over, I'm on YouTube watching, AI, how it's working, how to write different prompts, how to make it work for you. But I think if you have to stay updated, because if you're going to open up a retail shop right now, you're pretty much going to go out of business unless you got something amazing. So, but like you're saying, the digital landscape has changed. The internet's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can create, like I created my own book, my own courses. They're evergreen, so they're everywhere, and they're getting sales constantly. So I think sometimes we have to adapt to the times. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'm grinning because people who know me will say, well, Bob, what are you going to do next? It seems like every 10 years or so, I have gotten involved in something else, a new job requiring a new discipline. And so It used to be when people went to high school and prepared for what was coming later, or they went to college and prepared, they got a degree in accounting, let's say. And I did get a degree in accounting. But guess what? I didn't want to be an accountant. It just didn't feel right. And the US Army was calling. So there I went from one skill set to another skill set, and I was quickly trained on some other things that came along. And then after the Army, I went to grad school and got trained or got education in new discipline. And I was working in, as an example, I was working in science education without a degree in science. Of course, I had people who were scientists around me to keep me on the straight and narrow, but I was also working with teachers, K-12 teachers, and I hadn't been in classrooms. I only had the theory and they had the application. And then I was working with college professors. And then I haven't mentioned this before. I started working on something called US Education Challenge Grants, in which we were getting grants from the Department of Education to infuse technology into classrooms. And we did that with geographic information systems, coupled with environmental studies and US history. Hey, Richard, you're a history buff. And so when the Lewis and Clark bicentennial came along in 2003, we were out there helping teachers and professors do all of this stuff, the technology, the history, the new applications of geographic information systems. And so I was not an expert in any of those areas, but I had to count on my team members and I had to learn as we went along. And that means you have to be flexible. Have to be flexible and say, what is it that needs to be done? What is it I don't know? And how can I learn how to do that? Or how can I get good people to be on my team who can support me with whatever it might be? And so
Well,
you learn and you grow, and you may not be an accountant for 35 years. You might start out with that, but then you'll find out that there's a lot of opportunity in a lot of different jobs. You may have multiple careers as you go along through life. I think that's what you were alluding to.
yeah. Well, but the reason why I brought it up is we went out to dinner last week, and we have a certain member of our friends. They always want to be the smartest person in the room, and for me, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because I think that, I don't remember who said it. It might be Jim Rohn. I don't remember who said it, but they said if you're the smartest person in the room, you need a better room. And for me, I'm just always trying to get into better rooms, because that's the way I learn. You know, I can sit down now because I've had millionaires, billionaires, athletes, doctors. I can sit down with anybody and have an intelligent conversation with them because I listened to what people were saying for the last 8 years. And I think a lot of us are afraid. You know, somebody always said, I think it might have been my friend Gary Vaynerchuk. He said you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of us are afraid to be uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So talk to
Yeah.
us about that.
So our football, you reminded me of our football coach who went down to the Tampa Bay after he left the Cardinals, and it was something like no risky, no bisky, or something like that.
No risk
I,
it, no biscuit, baby.
and so there are many times in my life, and I want to tell you, there've been times when I didn't want to take a risk, and I was just sitting on my duff, and I was thinking I was secure. I had an income, I had a family, a house, a car, and I wasn't taking risks. But if you don't take that risk and move outside your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. And so once you get out there and move out of that comfort zone, then you'll find that you had more capability, more potential, more skills, and more of that resiliency than you had realized. I give you an example. I hopefully this is a good example. In about 1989, I was thinking, Well, I may get out of the Army pretty soon, and who's going to hire a tank commander? And I probably ought to be sharpen some of my individual skills, and one of them would be public speaking. And so I joined Toastmasters International. And so that moved me right out of my comfort zone immediately. It's like, oh my goodness, my hands are shaking. I'm sweating. My knees are shaking. And then there were people there who would give you an opportunity to get up and give a presentation or to talk about something, sometimes impromptu speeches or often impromptu speeches. I found that after a while, I could do that. I could go out there. I could stand in front of people without my hands shaking and my forehead perspiring. And it was all about moving outside that comfort zone. So many times in life, for instance, when I went back to grad school and I wound up out there as an instructional designer or senior instructional designer, there were many times when I was learning as I went along, still outside that comfort zone. And so, as we started with no risky, no bisky, you have to just not sit on your hands. You have to say, what is it that I need to do? How can I go about it, even if I'm a little uncomfortable about it? I'll give you another thought. We've had a lot of wars, been in wars in the last 20 years. As soon as I got out, it seemed like we've been in war ever since the US has been. And I was thinking, you know what? I'm ready now to go back and be that company commander, that infantry company commander, or armored tank company commander. I'm ready to go back and be the battalion commander now after all the growth and the thinking and the education that the Army gives you as to how to get out there and accomplish that mission. Whereas as a first lieutenant back there being a battalion S3, way outside my comfort zone. But what do? You just say, what needs to be done? How can I go about it? And who can help me?
All right. So as you see, I write stuff down as we talk because it's stuff that I consider important. Talking about Mr. Bruce Arians, coach of the Cardinals, moved over to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay had a losing mentality. But so Bruce, he could have stayed in Phoenix, in Arizona. He could have just collected a paycheck, got paid, but he wanted more. He wanted a Super Bowl win. And once he got to Tampa, he said, who's the best out there? Who do I need to finally get me my chip? So he brought in Tom Brady, where a lot of other coaches would be like, this is I'm in charge. It'll be my way. And then he would not have the Super Bowl win if he didn't bring in Tom Brady. But he had to get uncomfortable by moving from Arizona to Tampa Bay. And then he had to upgrade the people in, because as soon as he got there and as soon as Tom Brady got there, everything changed. Everybody wanted to play for Tampa Bay all of a sudden. So I believe that it all starts from the head down. If you want to change either a business or if you want to change an industry, it all starts from the head down, correct?
We might get into a discussion about that and think about that and argue both ways. But I think you're right. Look at Elon Musk and what he's done with Tesla. And Mr. Musk has been out there with, and maybe a lot of people are not keen on some of his political views and some of the things he's done. But look at what he's done with Tesla and his space effort, SpaceX, if I got that right.
Yeah.
So you're right about that. You bring in somebody who has the vision and can give the vision and the mission and the motivation to excel, to achieve, and give them a way so that they can see that same vision. They can envision where they're going. And Tampa Bay is a good example of what took place. It had been a while since Tampa Bay had been to the Super Bowl, and so that was a turnaround success story. Now
So,
let's see what the Denver Broncos can do this year.
and like I said, in order for them to win another championship, going for Denver, they brought in Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning was the most prepared player in NFL history. He knew the defense, the offense, special teams. He could have coached himself because he was prepared.
Yep.
And Denver didn't win a championship since Elway. So they had, again, it was all about bringing in somebody, and it changed the culture. Within a year, they were in the Super Bowl. So it's if you're going to build a team, you might as well build a team of winners.
Exactly correct.
So talk about your company and talk about what you're doing today to help veterans become business stars.
Well, we had a vision a couple of years ago of creating a website such as Angie's List, but strictly for veterans. And it's called GettaVet. And so we built a platform, online platform, and its mission is to have retirees or people who have a DD 214, that is, they were in the armed forces and they honorably got discharged, even active duty, and their spouses, so that they could list the skills that they could perform on our website. And then the public could come to the website looking for whomever. Somebody works in AI or builds websites or paint houses. And so it would be military only. That was our vision. And that's where we started. We built a website. And at the end of the web's building, we looked at it and we said, well, we're not quite there yet. We need to refine this. That's where we are right now. We need to refine this so that it's user friendly, to develop some web apps so that, or mobile apps rather, so that people can do it with their tablet or their cell phone. And so we wanted to give the public an opportunity to hire veterans. There's a site out there that does the same thing for firefighters, first responders. It's called Hydrant, and so they're a little bit ahead of us right now, but we hope to catch up. What do we need to do to make this reality? Well, we're going to look for some people who have the same vision and want to contribute. That is, invest in our business so that we have some seed funding to do the refinement, the web work, and then we're just really going to go. We'll start in Arizona, and then we'll go to Texas, and then we'll go around the country offering this service. Like other services, there's a fee. The freelancing services, there's a fee to join. Costs $5 a year, which is not very much when you look at some of the other freelancing websites. And so how does this work? A veteran might come and sign up with us and say, hey, I want to do proofreading. I mentioned that before. So he or she would put 2 or 3 lines of credentials in there. Here's what I do is proofreading. And then somebody out there with documents that needed to be proofread would come to GettaVet and find that veteran, and then they would negotiate hourly rate or the job rate and so on. And all the payments would take place online so that the money goes right into the veteran's bank account at the end of the job. So that's who we are as GettaVet, a freelancing website for veterans. We are in a state of making it better so that we are fully functional. We can't do this today, but shortly after we get those individuals who want to come along with us as investors, we will make this happen.
Okay, so pretty much you guys are like Fiverr for veterans, pretty much.
Yep.
Okay, so, and I got to ask, because like when I said, well, I'm going to start interviewing high level achievers and entrepreneurs and athletes, people around me were looking like, you can't do that. Who said that you can do that? So, a lot of people put us into boxes or and you start thinking about, having imposter syndrome. So, a lot of people will be like, wait a minute, hold on a second. So you got a Vietnam veteran here starting websites. It probably some people, it didn't compute. They're like, you can't do that. So what was that like? I'm sure you had a couple naysayers and you're just like, well, yeah, just watch me and take pictures as I do it, because I'm going to make it happen.
You know what? Everything's possible as long as you have a goal and a vision about where you're going. I created, personally created, I had over 20 million in grants, and this is working in the nonprofit arena. And so I had projects with NASA, NOAA, National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, and these were $1 million grants and multiple year projects. For instance, one of the projects with National Science Foundation, it was going to be a 3-year project and it turned into a 10-year project. And the materials we put up are still out there and they're still in use today. And so I am confident that we will be able to pull this off. We've already got our web developers, mobile app developers lined up. I've been talking to marketing people because we want to get the marketing right, because the public and the veterans need to become aware of what we're doing and what this opportunity is and what it means as far as the public engaging with veterans, that is giving them jobs and having veterans work for them. So if you take two people side by side who have the same skills and one of them's a veteran, who do you suppose the public is going to hire? I would venture that it would be the majority of the time they would go for the veteran.
Now, something
So,
I keyed in on while you were talking,
yeah,
because you said the word vision. And the reason why, because I'm about to do a post later on this afternoon, that if you have prayer, meditation, and a vision board, you're pretty much going to hit your goals. Like for me, my one of my main goals was to go on a cruise somewhere, go to the islands, and take my family to Atlantis. We've just booked the cruise. We're going to book Atlantis, but that's been on my vision board for the last 8 years. And I've been praying about it and I've been meditating about it. And I got a picture on my phone of Atlantis. So talk to us about having praying and then also visualization and then vision.
that's a very, we have to have a strong faith in where we're going and that the Almighty will give us the resources to do something. So meditation that's interesting because we talked about meditation in my Toastmasters group just this past week. I'm encouraged by the things that you said because I'm a firm believer that if you are a person who can become spiritually adept, that means that you meditate, you know there are higher powers, you call on the Almighty, you call on the angels to assist you in what you are doing, saying, hey guys, here's what I want to do. I know the resources will be there and that we can make this happen. And so I appreciate you bringing this aspect into our conversation because I think it's important. And it's one in your vision of helping veterans as you go along, especially those homeless veterans. But oh, by the way, one of my thoughts about GettaVet is that, and of course, there is a fee that comes into GettaVet as part of the service. And what does that fee do? It supports the program and keeps the program going. But GettaVet will reach a particular point where we can contribute to nonprofit organizations such as you were just talking about, the homeless, the wounded warriors, the people, scholarships for Gold Star families, et cetera, et cetera. There's a host of really fine nonprofits out there. And if GettaVet, when we have the wherewithal, can contribute to that, that would just really make my day and would complete that vision of the service that we bring to veterans and their families.
Like I said, I'm a big vision guy. I'm a big vision board guy. And every night before I go to bed, of course, the first thing I do is I pray for my wife, hold her, I pray for her. And then I say my gratitudes because I'm so grateful. But before I go to bed at night, there's a house, a beach house that I want. And there's a particular truck that I want. I know the color. There's a boat that I want. I know the color. And I can actually picture me sitting on the steps with my brother-in-law. We're going to go fishing on that boat. And I know it's going to happen, but I also say, Lord, I know in this life I own nothing. Everything you let me borrow, I'm grateful for. But let me borrow more. Okay? It's all yours. I just want to borrow it and have fun with it. And I think if you have faith and you realize that money to him, money is nothing. Even when they said, the streets are paved with gold, and he'd be like, why are you bringing pavements to heaven? If we realize that he owns it all, if he's my father, that means I own it all. That means everything is wide open. You know what I mean? So I think if we have a little bit more faith and realize that we're only putting limitations on ourselves, correct?
Right. There's a universe of unlimited resources out there, an infinite amount of resources. And if we think about paucity, that is, if we think about being poor and we don't have enough and we can't get there, we can't make this happen, and then that's what you're going to get. So your thinking process will be, I'm going to be successful. This is going to work. Here is where we're going. Here's what we're going to do. And the benefits of this will be in helping veterans. But at the same time, based on what you were saying, at some point, there will be people who are on our team and they will be having a career as well as they go along. So you're supporting more people. And hopefully, we will be hiring veterans to work on our team. We've always looked first at veterans when we're doing things with GettaVet, by the way. Air Force, we've had Air Force people working with us and Army people. So that's just another way of paying back to the military. But
Now,
you're right
for
about the
me,
vision. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. I was just going to reinforce this vision business and keeping the positive thoughts in your mind and getting rid of those negative thoughts. Like, oh, geez, that boat costs too much. Oh, I can't have that car. Well, I'm not going to have that house. Those thoughts have to go away. And you have to keep in your mind the positive thoughts about where you're going and what you're going to do with your business and those things that you want to materialize in front of you as you go along.
Well, like for me, I had to change my mindset. So I started taking a deep dive into mindset. And, even Tony Robbins, the book Awaken the Giant Within, even he says, once you change your I have to I get to, and you start living a life of gratitude. Like last night, I had the most amazing night. My wife made a huge prime rib, and then all the kids got together, and then we all went and sat in the jacuzzi. It was an amazing night. But for me, when I went to bed last night, I'm like, Lord, I'm so grateful. I'm so thankful for what you're doing for me. And I know there's more coming, but even like for me, every morning I get up, I do my stuff in the house. And when I'm wiping down the kitchen, I'm like, Lord, thank you. Thank you so much for this kitchen. I can't wait for the bigger kitchen that's coming. But I'm grateful for what I have. And I think that's what sets a lot of people, a lot of the uber successful people, is because they know they want something bigger, but they're grateful for what they have. What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking that you're onto something there in expressing gratitude, because it's so important to acknowledge that you have achieved and that you have a lifestyle and the ability to be with your family, that you are employed, that you have food on the table, and a way, means of conveyance to get around, to drive around in New Jersey, if you will. I think a lot of times we might be apt to be disgruntled and say, but you know what? I wanted that Tesla, I wanted that Porsche, and I don't have it, and bah humbug. When in fact we have our health, we have something to eat, or we're warm and dry, or we're cool and dry and well fed. And so we have to give gratitude to what the Almighty has put in front of us and allowed us to do and to achieve as we go along. And then I would turn this from the gratitude to things that we have, to gratitude for what we can do in the way of service to others, and so that we can make their lives better, so that we can give back, so that we can create opportunities, so that they can have those things, and so that they can express gratitude for what came their way. So that's one of the things, aspects I would like to see uh, for GettaVet.
No, and one thing, I keep an empty cup here. I keep is my vertical momentum cup. I keep it here, and it's empty for a reason, because on every show I tell people I can't pour from this cup if it's empty. I have to keep my cup full so I can pour out for others. And I think a lot of people, they're so busy trying to help everybody else that they're not practicing self-care themselves. So guys, if you're watching this, make sure, because being an entrepreneur can be a lonely job. It can be very lonely. So if you're not practicing self-care, you need to start practicing, because you can't take care of an employee. You can't have 10 employees if you can't take care of yourself. Correct?
I could just touch on something that is key, and that is not only taking care of yourself, but taking care of those employees or people on your team. And so I would always have the the goal or the vision of making sure my people were taken care of, that they had opportunities to go to workshops, to get education, get training, that their wherewithal was secured, as far as I was able to help them make that happen. Now, I have to admit that sometimes I didn't quite uh, succeed as well as I wanted to, but I always kept in mind, you got to take care of your people
I love it.
in addition to yourself.
And that also includes your wife, your kids, your significant others. For me, I took a 3-day weekend. We went to Atlantic City for a couple days, and I recharged my batteries. So, guys, you got to make sure that we're working for a reason. So enjoy the time off. And the old saying is, if you work hard, you play hard. Don't just work hard. So, Bob, how do we find your company? How do we find you?
I know you just asked me a question because you said, and well, Bob, but it became through broken and distorted.
How do we find GettaVet?
Say that again, please.
How do we find GettaVet?
You just talked about going to Atlantic City. I don't know what the question is, but I think
How do we
about
how do we find you? How do we find you, and how do we support your mission?
I got you. Thank you very much. I was going to tell you about a trip I'm taking this week, and I didn't have the question right at all. Our website is GettaVet.com, GettaVet.com. It's right there in front of you, GettaVet. But my email address, the email I use is Bob_Myers, MYERS @att.net. That's the easiest way to reach me on email. That's the easiest way. You can easily find me on LinkedIn, oh, by the way, and Facebook. I'm in all those places. And so is GettaVet has a Facebook page as well. And so if people, what we need to to progress is I'm sure there are people out there who want to see a project like this happen. And I would suggest that it's going to be very lucrative as far as an investment, and also provide that service to military retirees, active duty, and people who have their DD-214. So thank you for that opportunity to say that. And by the way, I want some of that coffee you sell.
I'll send you the link. So guys, make sure you go to www.GettaVet.com. As soon as we hang up, make sure you check out the website. The website is very easy to use, even for a low-tech redneck like myself. It's very easy to use. So make sure you check out Bob on LinkedIn, Facebook. He's everywhere. And Bob, I just want to say thank you, brother. I'm so grateful for our friendship, and hopefully we can just building and building and building.
Let's do this.
I love it. All right, guys. So as you know, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy, and he says that today, for like my T-shirt says, "Today I decide." Today, you guys get to decide to be a victim or the victor. Guys, please choose to be the victor and put away that victimhood mentality. I love you guys. And guys, make sure you stay for about another half hour. I have another guest coming up. Joe, my Joe Graham, he has a podcast called the 150K Podcast. We're going to talk about high ticket sales and how to close high ticket clients. So make sure you check that out. Bob, have an amazing week, brother.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, guys. So remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is up. I will see you in about another half hour.